Welcome to Navy Paints, and in this video I'll be painting Dahyak Grekh the Kroot tracker. Let's crack in. Before I've painted the model, I've undercoated it with Vallejo's Hobby Paint White. The first colour here is Khaki from Vallejo. This is from their game colour range. I've applied this to the cloak and I've done this with 2 thin coats with a little water in the paint. When putting down these base colours I was trying to be as neat as possible, but I wasn't too worried if I got paint in the wrong spot, as I could always go back later and fix them up. For the skin I've gone with Crypt Wraith from the Amyu painter. This was a real tough paint to use, so I watered it down to about a 70-30 mix of Crypt Wraith and water, and almost applied onto the model like a contrast paint from Citadel. If you got another green, use that. I'd avoid this colour at all costs. It was bloody horrible to work with. Once the skin had fully dried, I gave it 1 coat straight from the pot of Military Shader from the Amyu painter. For his stomach and beak, I've given them a coat of Averland Sunset from Citadel. This is applied straight from the pot with 2 coats. For the straps around the model, I've gone with Uniform Grey from the Amyu painter. This is applied with 2 coats straight from the pot. The 2 browns for the rest of the leather, I've gone with Heavy Brown from Vallejo and Mournfang Brown from Citadel. These were both applied with 2 coats with a little bit of water mixed into the paint. Here I am applying the Mournfang Brown to the model. And this is the Heavy Brown from Vallejo. For all the metal areas, I've gone with Gun Metal from the Amyu painter. This is painted straight from the pot. This is applied with 1 coat. For the rings on his hands and the bracelets on his arm, I've painted those with Retributor armor from Citadel. This is 1 coat straight from the pot. For the stitching around the weapon, his hair and his nails, I've painted those with Rakarth Flesh from Citadel, and this required 1 coat straight from the pot. At this stage of the painting, I've decided to go around the model, paint any areas I might have missed, fix up any touch-ups, You need to do this now, as the next step will be applying oils. Once you've applied the oils, it becomes a lot more challenging to make any alterations to the model once the oil has been applied. After I was happy with the model, and before applying the oil wash, I've sealed it with Mr. Super Clear's matte varnish. This will help protect the paint from the oils. You don't need to do this step, but I always do it just in case. To line up all the colours and tie them all together, I've given the model an oil wash. This is a 70-30 mix of Ivory Black and Burnt Umber, both from Van Gogh. This was mixed with a little bit of white spirit to help the paint flow. I've simply just applied this over the entire model, not worrying where I get it. Just don't want it to pull too thick in areas, but if it does pull, it doesn't matter. We can always remove it later as it's an oil paint. Once the entire model was coated with the oil paint, I've got some pure white spirit now, and using a paintbrush instead of cotton swabs, I'm going over the entire model, slowly removing the oil paint in all the raised areas of the model. This will leave the recesses darker and the raised areas brighter. At any stage while removing the oil paint, if you happen to remove too much, just go back to the original oil paint and add it to that area. You can go back and forward this way between the white spirit and the oil, adding and removing as much as you like until you're satisfied with the colour or result. Once I was happy with the amount of oil paint I'd removed, I let it dry overnight. You can speed it up by hitting it with a hairdryer, but I had some spare time, so I just let it dry naturally. I then hit it with a coat of Mr. Super Clear matte varnish. This is a really light coat. The reason why I did this was to protect the oil I've already laid, as not aggravate it again when I apply another coat on top. This next stage is pure burnt umber with a little white spirit. This is applied to his hair, his cloak, his nails, and the spikes around his body. Once I applied it to the model, again with white spirit, I removed it slowly, leaving it in the deepest recesses of the cloak, hair and nails. Like before, if you remove too much, just reapply, and remove as much until you're happy. And I went back and forward with the brown over different parts of the model, 3 or 4 times in some cases, adding and removing the paint until I was happy with the result. Once I was happy with all the adjustments I made, I hit the model with a hairdryer until it was bone dry, gave it another real light coat of the Mr. Super Clear matte varnish to seal it. After that had dried, I then began the highlighting process. Before highlighting the model, I painted in the eye, and I've done that with Rakarth Flesh from Citadel. When putting in the eyes, just be real careful as usual. If you do happen to make a mistake, you can use a green to fix it up. To bring the brightness of the skin up a little bit, I've highlighted that with Goblin Green from the Army Painter. I've been real sparing with this paint, applying it, having a look what I've done, and if I need to, applying a little bit more, but just don't go over the top with this colour. For all the other highlights, I've just gone with the same base coat I used, so Averland Sunset over Averland Sunset, Mournfang Brown over the Mournfang Brown, the Khaki over the Khaki, the Rakarth Flesh over the Rakarth Flesh areas. Only the heavy brown areas was different, I used Khaki to highlight that. For the cloak, I used the Khaki to put light little chips and scratches to show the leather had been worn up. Again, the highlights were real subtle, as I did on the skin. This is the Averland Sunset highlight. This is the Khaki highlight. This highlight is the Rakarth Flesh. Here's the Mournfang Brown highlight. To paint in the eyeball, I use Abbadon Black from Citadel. This is straight from the pot. Just take your time when putting it in the eyeball. If you do muck it up, put down the base coat again and have another crack. To paint his little scars in his head, I wanted him to look fresh, like he's engraved them before the battle, so I've gone with Pyyrole Red. This is an ink from Liquitex. This is applied straight from the pot and carefully applied to little cuts in his head. To paint his goggle and his lens, I started with Goblin Green as a base coat, and then just gradually added some white to the paint, painting less and less of the goggle as I went along. To finish off the lens and the goggles, I put a line of matte white in the left bottom corner, and a dot of the same colour in the top right corner. At this stage the model was done, but I just wasn't happy with the scratches I applied earlier, they were a bit too bright. So I went back to the burnt umber from Van Gogh, put a little bit of extra white spirit in this mix just to lighten up the paint a lot, and applied this to all the leather areas where I'd scratched, just to lighten down the scratches and make them look a little bit more worn in and natural, and just remove the excess like I did earlier with a paintbrush. With all the oils done now, I can go ahead and finish off the goggles and the lens, and I've done this with gloss varnish from the Army Painter. This is painted straight from the pot. This will give the goggles and the lens a nice shine, and also make them look a little bit different from the rest of the green. With the model painted, I've applied him to a base. Here's a link to how I made this. I applied him to the base using a paper clip as a pin and a bit of super glue. As a final touch to the model, I put some pigment binder on his feet, cloak, and a little bit on his shins. Then using a stippling brush, I applied some light yellow ochre from Vallejo. When applying pigments, just slowly build them up. So what you want to do is apply the pigment, let it dry, see what it looks like, and if you're not happy, apply some more. If you do go a little bit heavy with the pigments, don't worry, you can just use a brush to dust some of it off. And with the pigment applied, the model is now done. Here he is on the hunt for his next victim. Thanks for watching Nephew Paints. If you liked the video, please click the sub button or leave me a like. If there's anything you'd like to see in a future video, please leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Catch ya.